The story takes place in a typical high school, and we're inside the cafeteria. We find our main character sleeping until his friend shows up with 2 trays. The chubby guy tries to wake him up, telling him he brought lunch. He figures Gavin is exhausted from staying up late talking to some girl. Slowly waking up, our MC wonders where that amazing smell is coming from. Then he realizes the smell is coming from the food right in front of him. Gavin immediately gets hyped and lets out a yell, and then starts staring at the food with his eyes sparkling. Without a second thought, the kid starts devouring everything like a wild animal, and his worried friend tells him to eat slower so he doesn't choke. But it was too late, and our protagonist also devours his friend's food. After stuffing his face, he feels relieved and says he's finally back. He can't believe he was actually reborn, and his buddy asks if he was a starving ghost since he ate his share too. Gavin then confirms that he really was reincarnated from a starving ghost. He was in a frozen apocalypse, and there he ended up starving to death. The chubby guy doesn't get it and thinks he's acting this way because his girlfriend dumped him. Then the protagonist puts a hand on his friend's shoulder and says he's happy he's still alive because now they can start over. Yahello is freaked out by what Gavin said and tells him of course he's alive. Our protagonist then asks for the date, and his friend replies that it's August 8th, 2024. Gavin reveals that in half a month, the world will enter an ice age with temperatures of -50 degrees. But Yahello thinks that's ridiculous and offers to help if his friend is in trouble. The protagonist says he needs help, and the chubby guy says he can count on him. At that moment, Gavin asks to borrow $1 billion and his friend spits out his drink. Yahello, in disbelief at the absurd request, asks if he's serious, and our boy confirms it. The protagonist's friend refuses on the spot, saying he couldn't get that kind of cash even if he sold his own father. Shamelessly, Gavin asks how much he'd sell his dad for, and he answers 500 million. But after realizing what he'd said, he gets mad at our guy. Suddenly, a couple shows up, and the guy invites the girl to a private room. Our protagonist then looks at them with a serious face, and the blondie says that after dinner they're going to a private theater. The chubby friend gets annoyed and points out that that's the protagonist's girlfriend, and she's cheating on him with another guy. With that, the couple walks right past the two of them, and the embarrassed girl asks what her boyfriend is doing there. Yahello defends his friend and throws it in the redhead's face, how ungrateful she is. But the girl doesn't even care and says she won't explain anything, since it's all so obvious. At this, the protagonist remembers that in the apocalypse, the blondie abandoned her and he took her in, and he treated her like a goddess, but the ungrateful girl betrayed him, and his demise was her fault. Yahello wants to leave, but Gavin calmly says there's no need to rush. The chubby guy doesn't get it and says just looking at her makes him sick. The blondie takes the opportunity to mock him, calling him a simp who just follows Zania around. Then the redhead humiliates our protagonist, saying he was harassing her and that she finds him disgusting. Gavin asks if she's done with her little show. The blondie scoffs, asking if Gavin is going to try and use his simp ways to win the girl back. Yahello tries to pull his friend away, but he asks for just 5 more minutes. The chubby guy gets desperate and doesn't understand why his friend insists on that girl. Zach finds it funny and says he'd love to see what he can do in 5 minutes. Without even thinking twice, the protagonist slaps him across the face. The redhead is shocked and worried about her new boyfriend. Everyone in the place is left with their jaws on the floor. Furious, Zach asks how he dares to hit him. The playboy then lunges at the protagonist, screaming that he's going to finish him. But Gavin is faster and lands a kick on him. Yahello gets all excited by his friend's actions, and the girl runs to help her boyfriend who's on the floor. Then she threatens her ex, saying he's a dead man for touching the heir of the dragon group. Zach then gets up and says he's a black belt in Taekwondo and refuses to lose to a punk like him. But our protagonist counters with an uppercut and calls him trash. Gavin thinks that the apocalypse was a disaster, but it also taught him how to fight. At this, the chubby guy asks since when his friend got so tough. The cheater is furious with the protagonist and yells that he'll regret this. And she even has the audacity to tell Gavin to kneel and apologize. Out of patience, Gavin slaps her across the face and asks who she thinks she is. Zach gets up, filled with rage, and promises he'll crush the protagonist like an ant. Gavin then knees him in the stomach and pulls something out from inside the guy's jacket and shows a spray bottle he took from his pocket. Zach starts to panic and tells him to give it back. The protagonist asks how many girls he's hurt using that spray. Zach plays dumb and tries to grab the object back, but Gavin is faster and sprays it in his face. The blondie starts screaming in pain, and Xenia has no idea what's going on. Desperate, Zach tells the girl to get away and stay far from him. The spray then starts to take effect, and he goes after the girl completely out of his mind and then starts tearing at her dress right in front of everyone. Xenia desperately tries to cover herself and says they're in public, but Zach continues his attack and the girl screams for help. The protagonist announces that the 5 minutes are up and the chubby guy is shocked by the scene. Gavin explains that it was a potent aphrodisiac the rich kid used on his victims. Yahello worries that Zach will call the police, but the protagonist tells him not to worry, because as the heir of the dragon group, he's too proud and will want to get revenge personally. The chubby guy understands the logic and agrees that Zach will want to handle this secretly. Leaving the cafeteria behind, Yahello asks what their next destination is, and the protagonist says they're going to sell the house. And without wasting any time, the two head straight to a real estate agency. The chubby guy says that's the only thing he has from his parents, but Gavin is determined to sell. With 3 million, he needs to stock up on as many supplies as possible for the apocalypse. Yahello doesn't understand the rush since house prices are going up, but the protagonist ignores him and calls him to their next stop, because now it's time to spend the cash, and their destination is a giant superstore. Once there, he immediately asks for 1,000 bags of rice, flour, and oil. And to top it off, he also asks for 10,000 cans of canned food. The employee is shocked by the order and asks if he's sure. Gavin confirms, and the chubby guy asks if he's opening a grocery store. The protagonist asks if they deliver, and the employee says they'll take care of everything. Then our boy remembers that Yahello's family owns a warehouse, and he asks to borrow the warehouse, saying he's going to buy even more stuff. 2 girls from the same class see him and start gossiping about the cheating incident. Ignoring them, Gavin goes to the electronics section and places more orders. He thinks that in the apocalypse, entertainment will be essential to pass the time. The employee is overjoyed and calls him the biggest customer of the year. The girls are shocked by the amount of money spent and wonder how he has so much cash. The protagonist then continues his shopping and asks for more coats to be packed up. The purple-haired girl gets suspicious and asks if he's really poor since he's already spent $1 million. They then conclude that he's a rich kid in disguise and decide to go talk to him. The protagonist thinks he's ready for the apocalypse as the two approach. One of them greets him, all friendly-like, and they come up with some lame excuse complimenting our protagonist's looks and faking interest. He remembers that in the past these two were thugs who mugged him in the cold. The girl then invites him to get a bite to eat. To their surprise, he accepts and asks Yahello to take the groceries to the warehouse. The gold diggers celebrate and already plan to take their sugar daddy to an expensive restaurant. The protagonist then goes with the two of them, saying he's starving. The trio then arrives at a fancy building. They show him the place and comment on how it's a very expensive luxury restaurant. Once inside, one of them asks what he thought of the food. Looking at the menu, the protagonist pretends that he finds everything too expensive. The girls don't care about the price and say they'll order if he doesn't want to. Then the one with glasses orders several expensive dishes like caviar, lobster, and prime steak. An hour later, the purple-haired girl was satisfied with the feast and then asks how the food was, and he says he's going to step out for a bit. Gavin then goes straight to the restaurant's front desk, and the hostess informs him that the bill is $18,000, but he ignores her and asks them to prepare 100 tables with the same dishes for pickup in 10 days. The receptionist is shocked by the huge order and asks if he's sure. Gavin then offers his VIP card and says he can pay for everything up front. He thinks about how he got sick of canned food in the apocalypse and wants to secure some good meals. The gold diggers think he's a cheapskate but sensible for going to pay the bill, and are already planning to ask him for some expensive purses later. The receptionist confirms the order but says there's still the bill for their table. However, he takes his card back and says they can pay their own bill. He thinks about how he spent almost all his money and now needs to take out some loans. And without wasting any time, he starts looking up some apps on his phone. He then celebrates getting almost $3 million in loans, but he still wants more. Suddenly, his phone rings, and it's one of the gold digger girls calling. The annoyed girl asks where he went, and the protagonist says something unexpected came up and he's already heading home. He then asks why he should pay the bill. The girl explodes with anger and says he was the one who invited them to eat, but our boy retorts that they were the ones who dragged him there and ordered everything. They get desperate with the massive bill and don't know what to do, but he reminds them that he warned them about the prices and they insisted on the most expensive dishes. Furious, the scammer calls him a broke loser and says he's a disgrace. Then, to prove he has money, Gavin tells her to ask the hostess about the order for 100 tables, and the receptionist confirms the order. With the confirmation, the girl begs him to come back and pay the bill, but the protagonist hangs up on her and says he's not going to spoil some idiots. With no money to pay the bill, the two of them panic, and the receptionist pressures them. The purple-haired one decides to call someone named Hunter to teach the protagonist a lesson. After leaving the restaurant, Gavin stops in front of a lottery stand. He remembers that in his past life he won the lottery with 5 numbers. With the ticket in hand, he gets excited, because he just needs to wait 2 days for the results. With that, the protagonist returns to the warehouse where his friend is waiting for him. The chubby guy complains that he was abandoned, but his friend promises to take him out for some fun. Yahello still doesn't understand the reason for spending so much money on supplies. Gavin explains that all of it will save lives in the apocalypse and asks him to trust him. His friend says he doesn't believe any of it because it sounds crazy, but the protagonist assures him that in a few days he'll believe everything. Suddenly, a group of bullies shows up and asks for Gavin Clark. The guy confirms it's him and asks if they're the goons of that Hunter guy. A bald guy with a baseball bat accuses him of messing with the boss's woman. The chubby friend gets scared and threatens to call the police if they try anything, but the thug scoffs and says he'll break their legs before the cops arrive. But the protagonist says with a smile that there's no need to call the police. The bald guy mocks him, calling him a coward and saying it would be useless anyway. The chubby friend tries to protect the guy using his father's name, but the thug says their target is only Gavin and they won't touch the rich kid. Desperate, the friend tells the protagonist to run while he tries to hold the guy's back. One of the goons shoves the chubby guy and the bald one attacks with the baseball bat. Yahello screams his friend's name in terror. However, our hero easily dodges and says the attack was way too slow. Then he counters with a kick right to the stomach, leaving the bald guy completely wrecked. Next, Gavin picks up the bat from the ground and hits him with everything he's got. With the thug on the ground, the protagonist shoves the bat in his mouth. Seeing that scene, the other goons are shocked by the MC's strength. He then turns to the thugs and challenges them all to come at him at once. The blonde one gets angry and orders his men to attack the protagonist. Our boy then defeats all the goons by himself. The chubby friend's jaw drops, unable to believe this is the same Gavin. With all the enemies on the floor, the protagonist asks if they've had enough. But Gavin demands 100,000 from each of them as compensation, and the thug says that's extortion. Gavin then hits him with the baseball bat, and then threatens to break everyone's legs if they don't pay up soon. With that, he gets 600,000 from the thugs, and thinks that he's not a cruel person, but the apocalypse changed his mentality. Then he says he's taking his friend to that exciting place he promised, and they arrive at a club full of dancing women. The perv seems to have really liked it and thanks the protagonist for calming his nerves. Gavin goes to the bar and says he's looking for the boss to make a delivery. They are then led down a hallway full of security guards. His friend gets scared and asks what kind of excitement this is, and what they are doing in this strange place. The security guards start saluting their boss and call him Mr. Lowe. The boss then asks what the boys are doing there. With a smile, the protagonist introduces himself and says he heard the old man was receiving some goods. So Mr. Lowe finds it strange that they are empty-handed and asks where the products are. Gavin points to himself and says that they are the goods, which gets the old man interested. But the conversation ends, and the boss orders his armed goons to capture the duo. With guns pointed at them, the chubby guy panics and tries to use his dad's name to get out of there, and desperately asks what this delivery is, and Gavin reveals that the guy traffics human organs. Hearing this, the chubby guy completely freaks out and yells that there's no way not to panic at that news. The protagonist then challenges the boss and asks if he's afraid to close the deal. With that, he makes his offer of 10 million for all the organs in his body. But the old man only offers 5 million, saying the market is down at the moment. The protagonist accepts on the condition that he gets the cash first and delivers the body in 3 days. Satisfied, the boss tells a goon to bring the contracts for the two to sign. But they only bring one contract, and Gavin points at his friend, and the chubby guy yells that he's not selling anything. But the protagonist insists that his friend is indeed selling, making him even more desperate. One of the goons then forces the chubby guy to sign the contract at gunpoint. Once outside, the outraged friend asks if the protagonist is even human for selling him out. He tries to calm his friend down, and the chubby guy remembers that this low guy is a dangerous gang boss. Gavin gets serious and says that in 3 days, the trafficking boss will be a goner. His friend doesn't believe it, but the protagonist invites him to watch the apocalypse arrive. They go to a mansion, and the protagonist says he wants to rent the property. The realtor confirms if it's just that one mansion, and he says yes. His friend doesn't understand why he's renting a mansion now, but Gavin says there's something good there. He remembers that this mansion was where he died in his past life. Determined, he declares that his new life will begin in the same place where the old one ended. The realtor informs him that the owner doesn't want to rent, but the guy offers double the price. Even with the offer of 5 times the rent, the woman says it's not a matter of money. Not giving up, the protagonist offers 10 times the amount and payment up front. The realtor changes her mind on the spot and promises to convince the owner no matter what. The protagonist says his only condition is that he can renovate the entire house. In the hallway, they see the guy's ex-girlfriend with her mother, who is encouraging her to win over Zach. His friend wonders what Zinnia is doing there, and Gavin reveals that Zach owns a mansion nearby. The redhead notices her ex's presence and gives him a look of disgust. She accuses him of stalking and says they still haven't settled the score from last time. The girl's mother butts in and humiliates the protagonist, calling him poor with no future. The chubby guy defends his friend, and the woman freaks out, threatening to get him expelled from school. Gavin scoffs at the over-the-top reaction and asks what his rental has to do with her. The ex-girlfriend doubts he has the money for the rent, which costs at least 20,000. The realtor returns and informs them that the rent is 25,000 a month. The girl's mother is shocked to learn that the poor guy actually rented the mansion. The redhead thinks he did it all to be close to her and tells him to give up. The protagonist and his friend can't believe the girl's level of delusion. Her mother says that 25,000 is nothing and drags her away. The realtor mentions that the first month's rent will be 250,000, and he agrees to pay on the spot. The mother and daughter are in shock at his offer, and the redhead thinks it's all an act. The protagonist shows the transfer confirmation of 250,000 on his phone. The realtor hands over the keys to the mansion and says he can renovate it however he wants. The girl's mother wonders if she misjudged the guy and if he's also from a rich family. The protagonist asks his friend if he knows the head of the biggest renovation company in the city. He asks his friend to set up a meeting, and the chubby guy doesn't understand the plan to renovate a rented house. Gavin tells him to stop asking questions and just set up the meeting, and he'll understand everything by tonight. His friend manages to schedule the meeting using his father's influence, and the protagonist thanks him. He promises to send a truckload of instant noodles as a thank you, and his friend complains. The guy assures him that his dad will love the gift and will even praise him for it. They arrive at the renovation company, and the receptionist asks them to wait for the boss. Coincidentally, the ex-girlfriend and her mother are also there for a renovation paid for by Zach. The redhead asks if the two have an appointment and realizes they're there. She once again accuses the protagonist of stalking and tells him to keep dreaming if he thinks he's going to win her over. The guy is sick of running into these two and wonders why they keep bumping into these idiots. The chubby friend tries to explain that Gavin is also there for a renovation, but the redhead scoffs at him. The protagonist introduces himself to the receptionist and says he has an appointment. The mother and daughter doubt he's really there for a renovation and think he's just showing off. The company boss arrives and asks who he has a meeting with. The receptionist points to the protagonist group, but the two gold diggers cut in. The girl's mother gets all happy and thinks that Zach's influence made the boss come personally. She takes the opportunity to humiliate the protagonist, saying her daughter gets to meet the boss while he has to wait. The redhead confidently goes to greet Mr. Zhao, introducing herself. The boss is confused and asks if she scheduled an appointment with him. The girl gets worked up and says yes, but the man doesn't seem to recognize her. He asks if her name is Gavin Clark, and she replies that her name is Xenia. Mr. Zhao pushes her aside and tells her not to get in the way if she's not Gavin. The protagonist introduces himself, and the company boss recognizes him immediately. Surprised that he's so young, the boss invites him to talk in private. The girl's mother is left confused, and the redhead thinks it's all because of the rich friend's family. They enter the manager's office to discuss the renovation details. Mr. Zhao asks what the young Mr. Gavin wishes to renovate. The protagonist says he wants to renovate a mansion. The boss explains that a mansion renovation is a small job and passes it on to a director. But Gavin insists that Mr. Zhao handle the project personally. The man says he's busy and only takes on large projects himself. The guy claims that his is a large project and the boss asks what the budget is. The protagonist then says the budget is at least 30 million. Mr. Zhao is shocked by the amount and can hardly believe what he heard. He asks if the guy is sure it's 30 million and not 3. The protagonist confirms the amount, and a director enters the room excited to help with the project, but the boss dismisses him and says he'll handle the project personally. Zhao asks what Gavin wants to do with so much money, since with that much you could buy a new mansion. The protagonist hands him a roll of paper and says the project blueprints are in there. Upon seeing the drawings, Mr. Zhao is startled and asks if he's building a bunker. Gavin says the budget might increase, and that the only requirement is to finish in half a month. The boss says the project is complex and looks like a doomsday war bunker. Gavin confirms that it's for the apocalypse and offers 20 million up front. Mr. Zhao accepts the challenge and promises to mobilize all resources to finish on time. The chubby friend is shocked by the 35 million expense and calls him crazy. The protagonist says money will be worthless soon, and his friend asks where the cash came from. He reveals he took out 10 million in loans, and his friend hopes the apocalypse story is real. The ex-girlfriend reappears and asks mockingly how much he spent to get attention. The guy gets irritated and says it's none of her business and that he doesn't want anyone's attention. The girl's mother brags that her daughter spent $1 million and says that's real power. The chubby guy chimes in and reveals that Gavin spent 35 million. The redhead and her mother burst out laughing and think it's a ridiculous joke. The protagonist challenges them, asking if they would call him daddy if it were true. The ex-girlfriend says he sold his house for 3 million and calls him a simple. The girl's mother joins the bet and says she'll call him daddy if he really spent that kind of cash. An employee runs after the protagonist, saying he forgot his contract. Seizing the opportunity, the girl's mother grabs the paper to expose his lie. But upon looking at the amount on the contract, her expression changes, and she's in shock. The redhead then scoffs and asks if the amount is so small it left her speechless. With a pale face, the mother stammers and confirms the amount is 35 million. Desperate, the woman accuses the guy of forging the contract just to show off, but the employee defends the document, saying it was signed by the boss and is legal. The protagonist then calls in the bet and tells her to call him daddy, but the old woman refuses to honor the bet. Out of patience, Gavin slaps her across the face. The chubby guy cheers on the action, and the protagonist tells him it's time to leave. Xenia, furious with the humiliation, threatens her ex, saying he'll pay dearly for this. Later, the two friends arrive at the mansion the protagonist rented for the apocalypse. Completely confused, the chubby guy asks why they came back and what his plan is. The protagonist then reveals that he's finally going to prove that the apocalypse is real. The chubby guy thinks his friend is acting weird and is sure he's completely lost his mind. Outside, Yahello complains about the cold and says they've been waiting for 2 hours and nothing has happened. But the protagonist looks at his phone and says it's almost time. Suddenly, a shooting star crosses the sky, and Gavin says it has finally arrived. Yahello doesn't get it and asks if it's just a regular shooting star. Gavin explains that the real apocalypse only comes in half a month, but there are signs like the cold and the stars. The chubby guy panics and says the shooting star is coming right at them. The protagonist thinks that these stars grant abilities, which is why his neighborhood became a base in the past, He remembers that this star fell on the mansion and was found by a thief in his past life. Desperate, Yahello yells for them to run because the star is going to hit them head-on, but the protagonist braces himself and says this opportunity is his. His friend tries to stop him and asks if he's gone crazy and wants to go out like that. Ignoring the warning, Gavin opens his arms and is hit squarely by the star's light. The chubby guy is terrified and thinks his friend was crushed and that it's all over. But Gavin reappears with an aura of power and says his physical stats have increased 5-fold. He then turns to his friend and asks if he believes him now. Yahello, surprised, stammers and asks if his friend didn't kick the bucket. The protagonist replies that not only is he alive, but he also gained an ability and is stronger. The chubby guy isn't convinced and says he doesn't see a difference, and asks how he's stronger. To prove his point, Gavin puts a hand on his shoulder, and with just one hand, he easily lifts the chubby guy who weighs over 220 pounds. The protagonist then asks once more with a smile if his friend believes him now. Yahello panics and can't believe he was lifted so easily with one arm. Gavin then takes him to the edge of the roof, leaving the chubby guy terrified. With a scary look, the guy tells his friend to get ready to go down. Then he simply jumps off the 33-foot-high roof with his friend. The two of them land without a single scratch. The chubby guy opens his eyes and is surprised to see he survived. Gavin asks again, and his friend gives in, saying he believes everything after that jump. Meanwhile, in the mansion next door, the redhead's mother asks what her daughter is looking at through the window. The girl says she saw the star fall and complains that it would have been better if it had hit her ex-bae. The redhead tells her mom that Zach will get revenge on the protagonist as soon as he gets back. At that moment, the mansion's doorbell rings. The mother answers the door, all happy, and the blondie asks where his girlfriend is. The girl then appears, all excited, and waves to her boyfriend. The rich kid grabs her and says he missed her these past few days. The mother feels awkward, and the blondie gets annoyed with her, telling the woman to get out of there. The redhead takes the opportunity to share the news and reveals that Gavin moved into the neighborhood. Zach explodes with rage and asks how he dares to show his face around him. The mother adds more fuel to the fire and says the guy did it to be close to her daughter. Furious, the blondie grabs his phone and promises he'll make the protagonist regret it. He then calls someone named Biao, introducing himself as Zach. The scene cuts to a boxing club, and in the ring, one of the boxers was talking to the playboy. Zach offers $200,000 for the fighter to take care of someone for him. Biao accepts on the spot and says the job will be done in 2 hours. In the ring, the fighter says he has a job to do and needs to end the fight quickly. His opponent gets angry at the arrogance and calls him a cocky rookie who's asking for a beating. But the boxer is faster and knocks out the champion with a single precise punch to the chin. The crowd goes wild with the victory and acclaims the fighter as the new king of boxing. Back at the mansion, the protagonist explains what the initial stages of the Ice Age will be like. The chubby friend laments humanity's fate, and Gavin asks what he's going to do. Totally convinced, Yahello stands up and says he'll do whatever his friend says without question. The protagonist then jokes and tells him to go back home and sell his own father like he suggested. His friend feels awkward and says his dad would never believe a story about the apocalypse. Gavin explains that soon money will be worthless and only supplies will truly matter. With that, the chubby guy makes up his mind and says he'll bankrupt the family even if his father punishes him for it. Suddenly, the protagonist notices someone approaching the house. He then tells his friend to be quiet, and the chubby guy asks in fear what's happening. Gavin reveals that the mansion is surrounded. In front of the house, the fighter Biao and his goons prepare to break down the door and invade. One of the goons was ready to hit the door with a giant sledgehammer, but just as he was about to strike, the protagonist swings the door open with force and knocks the unlucky guy out. Gavin and his friend appear and ask who these guys are. Biao is surprised and asks if he's a fighter for having noticed their presence. The protagonist then recognizes him immediately and calls him by his full name, Duan Hu Biao. The boxer is surprised and asks how he knows him. Gavin remembers that in the apocalypse, the fighter became a powerful ability user. Biao reveals that Zach sent him and that he's going to break some of his bones. The protagonist then tells the goon to leave so he doesn't get hurt. Biao then gets angry at the audacity and rushes the protagonist, but Gavin easily dodges and says the punch was way too slow. Surprised by his reflexes, the boxer tries another strike, but the protagonist takes advantage of the opening and lands a punch to his stomach. The other goons are shocked to see their boss get knocked down. The fighter recovers from the blow and says something is wrong while the protagonist asks if he gives up, but the boxer refuses to surrender and says no one in the world can make him submit. Out of patience, our hero lands a kick to his chin. With Biao on the ground, Gavin asks if he's had enough yet. Even defeated, the boxer insists he won't surrender and can't believe he lost. The protagonist finds this interesting and offers a way to save his sister in exchange for a favor. Biao is shocked to hear this and asks how he knows about his sister's illness. Gavin reveals that he knows about the terminal illness and that he fights to pay for her treatment. With renewed hope, Biao asks if he can really save his sister. Gavin says he's the only one who can save her and that it's up to him whether to believe it or not. Biao surrenders on the spot and says he believes him because he defeated him in combat and asks what mission he must complete. The mission is to go after Zach, give him a beating, and get as much cash out of him as he can. Biao stays silent without complaining. Then he calls his goons to follow him on the mission. A goon asks if the boss really believes the guy, and Biao says he's his only hope. In the other mansion, Zach thinks Gavin is already in the hospital and that it's time to have some fun. With that, he and Xenia enjoy a private moment in the bedroom, but suddenly a loud noise interrupts the mood. The girl's mother gets annoyed with the interruption and goes to see who's banging on the door. Upon opening the door, the woman comes face to face with Bio and his men and asks who they are. Out of patience, the boxer shoves the woman aside and enters the house with his goons. The woman is furious and yells at the intruders, asking if they have any manners. Biao, out of patience, just slaps the woman across the face. The couple comes downstairs, and Zach asks Bio if the job has been successfully completed. He then offers a card with the 200,000 payment for the dirty work. But instead of accepting it, the boxer lands a hard punch to the rich kid's gut. Zach is shocked and asks why the hired goon is attacking him. Biao points at Zach and tells his men to go after him without mercy. They then start kicking the rich kid who's on the floor. Desperate, the playboy tries to threaten the fighter with the power of his wealthy family. With that, Biao raises his hand and tells his men to stop hitting him. Thinking his threat worked, Zach brags and says the boxer made a mistake. Biao then reveals that his new boss ordered him to be hung up and to continue the beating. Zach panics at the crazy order and calls the boxer insane. As he's being dragged away, the rich kid wonders who this boss is and if it could be Gavin. Hanging there, the playboy reveals that his transfer limit is 10 million. B then demands that he transfer the 10 million immediately. At the mansion, the protagonist's friend shows him a message he received on his phone. He tells him about a class training session, but the protagonist immediately refuses the invitation. But he changes his mind when he learns the location is near North New City. He then confirms he's going, and his phone starts ringing right at that moment. It was Bio on the phone, telling him he got the 10 million from Zach. Then the scene changes to the lottery stand. The protagonist remembers the ticket and says he needs to check the results to buy more supplies. But upon checking the ticket, the protagonist is shocked because he didn't win the lottery. He thinks about the butterfly effect but finds it impossible since nothing else in the world had changed. With that, he realizes he needs to find another way to get money for supplies. The next day, the students gather for the college's practical training. Suddenly, the two gold diggers appear, and one of them asks how he dares to show his face there. And Gavin asks why he wouldn't dare to show his face. The one with glasses demands an explanation and says they had to work for a month to pay off the bill. Not caring, Gavin asks what he has to do with their problem. The girl then tries to seduce him and says they'll do anything if he pays off their debt. The purple-haired one joins in and offers a night with them in exchange for 20,000, but the protagonist turns the tables and asks the two gold diggers to lend him 40,000. The two of them are furious at the proposal. At that moment, Yahello appears, and the protagonist asks why his eyes are so swollen. His friend reveals it was from crying so much trying to convince his dad about the apocalypse. The protagonist gets excited by his friend's tactic and asks if his plan worked, but his friend says the plan didn't work because his dad ignored him for hours and then gave him a beating. Gavin then comforts him and tells him not to get discouraged because even he took a while to believe in the apocalypse. Suddenly, a professor appears and tells all the students to get on the bus for the training. 1. Inside the bus, the protagonist sits next to his friend. 2. The chubby guy then says he's thirsty and asks for water, but Gavin says he didn't bring a bottle. 3. Suddenly, the girl sitting next to our protagonist offers her bottle to him. 4. Our boy thanks her and immediately hands the water to Yahello. 5. The girl then comforts Gavin about the breakup with his ex and hopes he gets over it soon. 6. The protagonist says he's not sad and is actually happy to have seen her true colors. 7. She says she heard that Xenia was a scammer and offers him money, but Gavin refuses because he knows the girl's family isn't well off. 8. Seeing that scene, the chubby guy realizes there's a vibe between them, but the protagonist tells him to shut up. 9. After a while, the bus finally arrives. 10. The counselor then tells everyone to get off so he can announce everyone's internship positions. 11. He explains that the internships are divided into 3 floors, and the first floor is the worst. 12. And he starts announcing the names of the students who will be on the 3rd floor. 13. The two gold diggers celebrate getting the best spot, just as Hunter had promised, and one of them asks how they'll keep their promise to him. 14. They then look at the girl who had helped our protagonist on the bus. 15. And the purple-haired one says Kui is perfect because she's from the countryside, has no connections, and on top of that, she's a virgin. 1. The counselor then continues the roll call and announces the names of the students for the 2nd floor. 2. Yahello gets frustrated because their names weren't called even for the 2nd group. 3. With that, the professor announces that the remaining 3 will go to the 1st floor, the worst of all. 4. Kusui is disappointed and laments that they won't learn anything useful in that place. 5. The other students mock them and wonder why Yahello ended up in the same boat as the 2 poor kids. 6. The protagonist then confronts the counselor and asks what the criteria for that decision was. 7. And the man says it was a fair decision from the school and that he shouldn't complain about anything. 8. Gavin then accuses him of lying to his face and calls him shameless. 9. The professor gets angry and threatens to expel him from the school. 10. and tries to justify himself by saying it was fair to put a rich kid and a poor kid in the same place. 11. The chubby guy gets furious and reveals in front of everyone that the professor tried to extort his father. 12. Upon being exposed, the counselor gets angry and calls him insolent. 13. Yahello then shows his phone and says he has the recording of the blackmail to prove it. 14. Suddenly, a guy appears and says they've crossed the line. 15. And accuses them of having no respect for the professor. 1. The two gold diggers also get involved and defend the corrupt professor, saying the trio is ungrateful and that people like them don't even deserve an internship. Our MC gets fed up with the guy and tells him to shut it. The bully then calls him a simp, saying he's lost his mind ever since Xenia dumped him, and asks how he dares to talk to him like that. Without a second thought, our MC just decks him right in the face. The guy flies into a rage, screaming that he threw the first punch and lunges at him. But Gavin easily blocks the blow. The bully is stunned by his strength and can't figure out how he got so strong. Gavin then delivers a couple of slaps across his face and reminds him that he told him to get lost. Completely freaked out, the bully yells to the teacher that Gavin has gone crazy. Our MC then lands another punch on the guy and asks if he didn't hear him. The counselor shows up furious and orders our protagonist to stop and apologize. But our guy turns around and slaps the corrupt teacher right across the face without holding back. His buddy celebrates, saying how satisfying that was to watch. The other students are in shock, unable to believe he just hit a teacher. The counselor threatens him, saying he's kicked out of the internship program. But Gavin lands an uppercut on him and says he doesn't care. With the two guys on the floor, our protagonist calls his friend to get out of there. At this, his buddy gets worried and asks what's going to happen to Kiwakie. Our MC then turns and invites the girl to come with them, leaving her flustered. The two gold diggers butt in, saying they'll take care of her, but the teacher is only focused on expelling Gavin. They try to convince Kyuko to go with them, claiming our protagonist will ruin her future. But the girl says goodbye to him and tells our protagonist to be careful. With that, our guy tells his buddy that now it's time to take care of business. They arrive at a massive logistics park, and his friend explains it's the biggest one in the province. Yahello then asks if the plan is to get the supplies from this place. He thinks it's impossible since they wouldn't even be able to get inside. Our protagonist then spots a hiring sign and calls his friend over to check it out. He then approaches the recruiter and asks if they're hiring. The man replies dismissively that they're only hiring women at the moment. His buddy starts to panic and asks what they're going to do now. Our protagonist gets an idea and tells his friend to go get Kyuki to help them out. Meanwhile, back at the internship office, everyone was working hard. The one with glasses then tells her friend that Hunter called because Mr. Jang needs a girl right now. With a malicious grin, they decide Kyuki is the perfect girl for the job. The two then walk over to their coworker's desk and ask how she's doing. The girl, all happy, thanks them and says she's learned things she'd never see in school. The mean one replies that it was nothing and that's what colleagues do. The purple-haired one then asks if she's ever had a boyfriend, and she says no. The one with glasses gets excited and offers to set her up with a boyfriend. She refuses because she just wants to work, but the two insist that a rich boyfriend would bring in more cash. Without giving her a chance to refuse, the two drag her along to meet the guy. A moment later, they arrive at a fancy office building. Quickly tries to back out, but the two say they're already there and that the man is a good person. They then enter a room and introduce her to a man named Mr. Jang who was waiting for them. The old creep with a disgusting smile says the girl looks very pure. The purple-haired one shoves Kyuki forward and introduces her to her new boyfriend. The satisfied old man pays the two girls $30,000 for their help. The gold diggers say their goodbyes and tell him to enjoy himself, while the young woman begs not to be left behind. But they ignore her and slam the door in her face, leaving her trapped in the room. The disgusting old man then approaches and offers more money if she serves him well. The girl backs away and threatens him, saying she'll call the cops if he doesn't let her go. But Jang says all the security guards are his buddies and won't help her. Cornered, Kwee begs him to let her go, saying she just wanted to work in peace. The disgusting old man then slaps her hand, knocking her phone to the floor. He says it's impossible to escape because no woman has ever left that room unscathed. Lying on the floor, her phone starts to ring. It was a call from our protagonist. Back at the logistics park, our hero feels his phone vibrate in his pocket. He then pulls out his phone and sees that it's Kyuki calling him. He answers the call and asks what happened. But on the other end, the disgusting old man stomps on the phone, crushing the device to pieces. He then tells the girl to accept her fate because he's going to make her very successful. Kwee refuses and grabs a flower pot, saying she'd rather be taken out than give in. Across town, our protagonist finds it strange that the call suddenly dropped. He then realizes something bad has happened at Kumukoi and decides to race back there. Meanwhile, the young woman defends herself and throws the pot at the disgusting old man. The man is furious with the attack and says she doesn't know what's good for her. He then slaps the girl across the face, knocking her to the ground. Back at the building, the two friends are stopped by a security guard who asks what they're doing there. The chubby friend tries to use his influence, but the guard doesn't seem to recognize him. Losing his patience, our protagonist shoves the security guard and tells him to get out of the way. Gavin then says that Kwee is on the 3rd floor, and they're heading straight there. The guard tries to stop them, saying that Mr. Jang can't be disturbed right now. but our protagonist turns and says that he's Mr. Jang's father, so he doesn't need to wait. The security guard then asks how he can be the boss's father when he's so young. With that, the guard finally realizes that something is very wrong. He then panics and starts yelling for backup to stop the intruders. Our protagonist finally reaches the 3rd floor. As he steps out of the elevator, Gavin comes face to face with the 2 gold diggers. They're shocked and ask what he's doing in this place. But our protagonist, with a serious look on his face, asks where Kupui is. The purple-haired one says he's not an intern and has no right to ask. Gavin then repeats the question in a threatening tone. The girl tries to stand her ground, saying this is no place for him to make a scene. Out of patience, our hero slaps the girl across the face, sending her to the floor. The one with glasses is outraged and can't believe he dared to hit her friend. He then delivers another slap to the other gold digger, who also falls to the ground. With both of them on the floor, he asks for the 3rd time where their co-worker is. Scared, they point to a door and say that Kui is in Mr. Jang's office. The purple-haired one tries to warn him that the boss is well connected, but our protagonist doesn't care. He then kicks the door in with all his might to open it. Inside the room, the girl screams for help while the disgusting old man tells our protagonist to get lost. Gavin tells the disgusting old creep to let the girl go immediately. Irritated, Jung asks if the young man knows who he's talking to. Unintimidated, our protagonist grabs the old man's finger and starts to twist it, making Jung scream in pain. Desperate, the man starts screaming and calling for the building's security guards. Gavin gets annoyed and lands a kick right in the middle of the scumbag's face. He then goes over to Kui and asks if she's okay, and the young woman says he got there just in time. At that moment, the security guards finally arrive and ask who's causing trouble. The old creep gets up and orders his goons to take care of the 2 intruders. The 2 gold diggers celebrate, thinking our protagonist deserves a beatdown. Suddenly, one of the security guards goes flying and crashes right into the 2 girls. In seconds, all the guards were down for the count, and the women are in shock. The disgusting boss, terrified on the floor, asks what else the young man wants from him. Gavin then says he's going to make sure he never thinks about women again. And then he lands a strike right where it counts. With Jang completely out of commission, our protagonist turns to another matter. He faces the 2 gold diggers with a terrifying glare. Scared, the 2 try to shield themselves, saying he can't hit women. Our protagonist ignores their plea and slaps the one with glasses. He then delivers another slap to the purple-haired one and warns them that the only reason he held back is that they're still useful. He then calls his friends to leave the building, leaving them all in a heap on the floor. The gold digger tries to help her boss and says she's going to call the police, but the disgusting old man slaps her and tells her to take him to the hospital. He then grabs his phone and calls someone, asking for help to get rid of the kid. Outside, Kui thanks our protagonist for his help. He says it was nothing and asks what her plans are for the future. Katui laments that she lost her internship and now doesn't know how she'll get a job. Our protagonist then offers to find a job for the girl. She gets excited about the offer and asks if he can really get her a job. With that, the trio returns to the logistics park where it all began. The girl is surprised and asks if he really wants her to work there, and our protagonist confirms it. She then mentions that the position is for a warehouse manager and she has a degree in finance, but Gavin encourages her, saying that all work is valuable and she can shine anywhere. The recruiter gets annoyed and asks if they're going to take the job because it's almost closing time. With that, Gavin encourages her to apply and she agrees to take the job. Our protagonist then says goodbye and tells her they'll visit in a few days to see how she's doing. Yahello comments that only a fool like her would accept a security job when she's from the finance field. But our protagonist says it was precisely because of her foolishness that she got the opportunity. After leaving the logistics park, Gavin says it's time to head home. Suddenly, a gun is pointed at our protagonist's head and they're told not to move. It was Mr. Lowe's goons, and the 2 friends raise their hands in surrender. The thug warns them that their 3 days are up and now their bodies belong to the boss. Yahello asks if they're really going with these guys since he could easily take them down. But Gavin tells him to go with them because the real show is just about to begin. They then arrive at an abandoned warehouse and one of the goons orders the 2 to get out of the van. Terrified, his buddy points out that they're in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. One of the goons gets annoyed with the delay and tells the 2 to hurry up and get inside. But our protagonist quickly turns around, and with a swift move, he disarms the guy and snatches the gun for himself. Then, without a second thought, he lands a shot right between the goon's eyes, taking him out instantly. Seeing this, all the other goons go on high alert, but he's faster and takes them all down with pinpoint accuracy. His buddy is left with his mouth wide open, praising him and calling him a sharpshooter. Our protagonist then hands a magazine of ammo to Yahello to defend himself if needed. He remembers that during the apocalypse he had no powers, so he trained his marksmanship to survive.